Maybe.
Ev, can I ask you to mute?
Timothy, you are live.
Welcome to the online reception for the Mackenzie Art Gallery exhibition, Beyond the Stone Angel. Artists reflect on the deaths of their parents, and the related film program, Separate Journeys, Shared Paths. Filmmakers reflect on the deaths of their parents and grandparents. This evening is the space to remember those we have lost. Through the artists' offerings of poetry, music, film, dance, and personal reflections, you're invited to join in commemorating those significant parental figures and loved ones who are no longer with us, but whose legacy is never far from our hearts. To start off, I'd like to acknowledge the land where this exhibition takes place and from which I am speaking to you tonight. Treaty 4 territory, which is the homeland of the Cree, Saulteaux, Lakota, Nakota, Dakota, and Métis people. I invite you to join me in paying respect to the elders and ancestors of this territory and in offering gratitude for the land and water that support us. With that in mind, I'm pleased to introduce Elder Betty McKenna, the Mackenzie Art Gallery's first elder in residence, who will offer an opening prayer and blessing. Elder Betty is Anishinaabe from the Shoal River Band. She grew up learning many traditional teachings and has spent her life providing guidance, leadership, and generously sharing those teachings with academics, healthcare professionals, educators, and the entire community to create a positive and healthy society. Her presence here tonight is particularly appropriate as she has a special concern for end-of-life care for Indigenous people and families, and has shared her wisdom in a number of venues, including as one of the elders on a research team for the beautiful film, Completing the Circle, Healing Words About End of Life Spoken to Aboriginal Families. Please join me in welcoming Elder Betty McKenna.
Thank you. You will bear with me. I will let you know I put the tobacco out already for the offering today for this evening, and I'll light my smudge. And I will call on our ancestors to be with us and guide us, support us, and give us comfort in this evening. I will smudge my helper. Call on our ancestors. Mano kitama, kine maisin, kisawini miko, kisawini min, kinana go, miko, tawigan, Timigota Samakasin, and Manote it is no tatna, Timewata Samewatin, Agadi Chosa, Asamako Tetemea, Chimiquet Chimanto, Chimiquet. Ask the Great Spirit to look after all our loved ones, to take care of us in our time that we're together on this earth, and to help one another, support one another, and above all, practice kindness in every opportunity that we have. Miigwech Jamanto, Miigwech Nimamaki. Thank you.
Thank you, Elder Betty. Your prayers and wisdom are greatly appreciated, especially as we go through this pandemic, which has brought loss to so many of our families and our communities. Scott, can you bring up the first slide, please? The image which you see on the screen was taken in Toronto as I was walking to a studio visit for this exhibition in 2017. The group of angel statues which stand in front of the Church of the Nativity of the Mother of God brought to mind Margaret Lawrence's timeless novel, The Stone Angel, which tells the story of the death of a mother and is one of the most beloved works in Canadian fiction. I particularly am struck when I read the novel by the final two words of the narrative. To mark the death of the main character, Hagar Shipley, Lawrence ends the last sentence with a simple "and then," followed by a dash. A woman who was so full of life, so full of regrets and hopes, was suddenly silent. As readers, we are left with nothing but a line on the page, followed by a blank space. Scott, can you please continue with the slideshow? As you will see in the images of the exhibition, it is this paradox of presence and absence, which Lawrence so poignantly captured, that has guided my choice of work for this exhibition. These works fill in, for our generation, the space that follows, and then. The selected works provide timely and poetic entrance points into a grief that has affected so many of us, especially as a result of COVID-19. Using their firsthand experiences to peel back the veneer of convention, the artists in this exhibition explore the life-altering aspects of this event, often inflected by their diasporic, gender, and post-colonial identities. Their reflections take viewers through a spectrum of experiences, from pre-mourning to sickness and end of life, to rituals of mourning and memorialization. Recurrent in many of the works is a movement from the concrete details of a life lived to something that is ephemeral, transparent, beyond the veil. In this in-between space, presence and absence, beauty and sickness, memory and oblivion flicker and fluctuate. As in Lawrence's novel, stone-like opacity and spiritual transcendence overlap in poignant monuments to the life-givers who have left. Beyond the Stone Angel is a project with deep personal significance for me, as it grew out of the loss of my own parents over a short span of time about 6 years ago. While I was going through the process of grieving, I received a phone call from one of the artists in the exhibition, Deborah Carruthers, who was passing through town and wanted to invite me to dinner. She had lost her father a year or two earlier, and we were soon sharing memories about our departed parents. I was particularly intrigued, though, by a description of a work she was making, involving an antique canoe she had filled with rocks equal to the weight of her father, a modern-day mortsafe, which she had created to commemorate her father and their time spent at the family cabin in the Laurentian Mountains. That canoe set me off on a journey, as I soon afterward began to notice a plethora of works by contemporary artists addressing the theme of the death of a parent, including a number of works in the Mackenzie collection. With that discovery, the idea for this exhibition was born. In conjunction with the Stone Angel, I have also curated separate journeys, shared paths. Filmmakers reflect on the deaths of their parents and grandparents, on view in the Shumiatcher Theatre and through the Mackenzie website. Presenting works by Siafik Jafar, Stuart Marshall, Emma Roofs, and Sonia Ballantine, this collection of short films examines the ways death acts as a catalyst for artistic journeys, inspiring a search for answers, origins, and lost connections. For tonight's reception, our format will feature short presentations by 11 of the 12 artists in Beyond the Stone Angel. They will be responding to an open-ended invitation to remember those they have lost, whether parents or other loved ones. In conceiving this evening as a space for shared commemoration and mourning, I was inspired by Shauna Beharry, whose work addresses so movingly the time we are in. Shauna won't be sharing this evening, so I'd like to say a few words about her work. I had the privilege this summer to be present for a ceremony held by the shores of Wascana Lake here in Regina, in which Shauna transformed a jar into a star. The jar held traces of a performance which she created at the time of the death of her mother 3 decades ago. She had gifted this work to our provincial arts agency, Sask Arts, on the condition that she could transform it after the death of her father. That transformation happened this summer and resulted in the gifting of You Who Are Older Than Us, a moving commemoration to all who died in Saskatchewan during COVID-19 and those left behind. Among those lost was her father, Amos Beharry, who passed away in a Moose Jaw care home this January during the height of lockdown. It also recognizes the immense loss connected to the unmarked graves found this summer at the former Marival Residential School. On that evening by the lake, she spoke the name which had been revealed to her by the star in those dark days following the death of her father. As she voiced those words, You Who Are Older Than Us, a stunningly beautiful orange moon was rising over Wascana Lake. Those attending were given marigold blossoms to throw into the water, an offering from whoever we wish to remember. As the orange of my blossom touched the face of the moon, I thought of my parents, of the gift of life they had given me, of the love of art and nature I received from my mother, the appreciation of storytelling and history that I received from my father. And I thought of the long line of ancestors going back in time, including my 9 times grandfather, who died in a plague in war-ravaged Germany, no doubt one cause for our family's journey to this territory so many centuries later. And I thought of the water, which held me in the fastness of my mother's womb, and the water of tears which flowed when she died, a cycle beautifully captured in Robin Poitras's fountain. And I thought of the Creator, who gave the stars their names in the deepest depths of time. It was a moment full of love and gratitude. The love and gratitude that can only come in the wake of loss. The presence that can only come through absence. It has been a deep privilege sharing memories and stories with each artist in this exhibition. I thank you all from the bottom of my heart. Your courage, generosity, compassion, and creativity are an inspiration for us all. I wish to thank those who have helped me in the organization of this exhibition. Rebecca Duclos and Georgia Sherman of Georgia Sherman Projects, and Julia Kruger and Belinda Harrow of Sask Arts. As well, I wish to thank the entire team at the Mackenzie for their help in realizing the exhibition. Anthony Kendall, who initially supported the project. curatorial assistants Nick Wilson and Wagner Filio, who assisted in research, our expert curatorial team who made the exhibition look its very best, communications and marketing for bringing it to a wider audience, and our administration team, in particular, Jackie Martin, our fearless Director of Finance and Operations, who has worked tirelessly in the background for the past 32 years, making sure our projects are always properly funded and supported. Thanks to Don Hall, for our photographer, whose beautiful installation shots you've been enjoying, and to Christy Ross, Nicole Nugent, and Collective Broadcast for organizing this event. Thanks to Vivo Media Art Center, Group Intervention Video, and Winnipeg Film Group for their help in organizing the film program. And as always, I wish to thank the funders who make the work of the Mackenzie possible. South Saskatchewan Community Foundation, Canada Council for the Arts, Sask Lotteries, City of Regina, University of Regina, and Sask Arts. With that, I'd like to turn things over to the artists, starting with our first presentation by Robin Poitras.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Timothy. And thank you, Elder Betty McKinnon. Tonight, I wanted to share a dance video that was made on August 1st on the morning sunrise of the solar eclipse in Mongolia. Edward Poitras and I were traveling with a group of artists and were invited to do our own research, and we made a film and brought that back and worked with Larry Bauman to create a very short 6-minute piece called Eclipse. And Larry set it to the extraordinary song by Lasse de Sala, and I won't say more. Thank you.
Soon the space will be too small, and I'll go outside to the huge hillside where the wild winds blow and the cold stars shine. I'll put my foot on the living road and be carried from here to the heart of the world. I'll be strong as a ship and wise as a whale, and I'll say the 3 words that will save us all. And I'll say the 3 words that will save us all. Soon the space will be too small, and I'll laugh so hard that the walls cave in. Then I'll die 3 times and be born again in a little box with a golden key and a flying fish space will be too small. All my veins and bones will be burned to dust. You can throw me into a black iron pot, and my dust will tell what my flesh would not. Soon the space will be too small, and I'll go outside. And I'll go outside. And I'll go outside.
I visited tonight, and it was very special. Thank you.
Zach, you are live.
Oh, sorry. I couldn't see my my image. I would also like to thank you for inviting me to speak today. I'm coming to you from Texas, so it's nice to see so many familiar faces. And it's also just such a privilege to be included in this exhibition. I too visited it last week before I left, and it was a very profound experience. And I'm looking forward to going back and making more connections and reflecting on the work. I actually recently had a book of poetry published through Radiant Press, and several of the poems were from an earlier chapbook that were surrounding the death of my father, of which Moonflowers, My Father's Skin, which is in the exhibition, is included, are sort of overlap a lot of the themes and some of the visual references in the actual drawing. And so I thought I would just read a selection of these poems. But I'll just say a couple of words about the experience of my father's death. So my father died very suddenly of liver cancer, and he passed away in front of my eyes very quickly. And as he died, his skin turned a bright yellow, and it was a very difficult thing for me. Because as I reflect on it, it was a very profound and beautiful experience, but also very obviously troubling. And the drawing took many, many, many years to occur, but I found it very comforting. I found a lot of solace in writing about the experience. And so the poems came very quickly. The drawing came very slowly. So I'll just, with that, I'll go ahead. Virgo moon. September fills boxes. A wounded soldier saturates a dresser drawer. A photograph's edges smell of vinegar. Clever moon. In my mother's body, you cradled me with a crescent, found a way for my birth to be 1 month late. I remember my grandmother's bony hands, withered with the dread of forgetting. Cover your feet, she'd say, tucking me in at night, or the devil will pinch them while you sleep. Wide awake with toes discreetly out of sight, I'd stare out the window at the trees, abandoning the cool green for a warmer coat, leaves yellowing like his skin to greet the Virgo moon. Bouquet. MRI measures whirling decay, our most intimate bits. Forge a gray mass of values, a dancing grayscale of diagonal telling, cloning our experience for the magnificence of an indefinite timeline. So often stuck in the moment when a burn feels like a rush of cold water, the mind telling the body it's not as bad as it actually is. A bouquet of cut limbs planted across my back, green fringe of thumbs incapable of amputation. There are no spaces between blood and healing. The other side. The morning your breath left you, the nurse says it's time. Your toes hard as granite. Garden of skin, blooming bright yellow. Premature autumn, followed by a Virgo sky. I hadn't even thought of a way to say goodbye. 6 a.m, sinking 6 feet into ordinary sheets. The nurse crying at the door to your hospital room. Reminds me of the day our family cat was killed. Her little head cocked back, skull broken, an eyeball dangling like a milky red marble. I took her tiny body in my hands, turning her over to find the other side unharmed. Her gray tabby fur cradled my unflinching dread. You told me, put her in the bin out back, but I wrapped her in my plaid winter scarf and buried her behind the lilacs. I pull back the sheet, reveal your dying transformation. I can't turn you over to find the other side unharmed. I lay across your belly, a stiff flaxen mound of flesh. The cloud spitter. I watch the cats from the bathtub use our size 12 shoes to strategize trench warfare, the TV blaring stupidity. Sink low into my bathwater, fleshy submarine. I imagine a eulogy for the buoyant ones. I don't have to put you in the ground anymore. I can just spread you on the circumference of things. Bodies of water with their untidy depths, all the exotic places they could guide you to. I am the cloud spitter, gravity a valued employee. Where would you like to go? And I have just one more poem. Things to remember when I die. Put me back in the ground where I came up, the garden of skin. Bury me in the backyard with the cats. Keep me from the masochistic whispers of graveyard sainthood. Out of sight of watchful cobblestone glances. Grace I wanted nothing to do with. Every now and then, spill some coffee into the earth for me, an offering to an atheist. The green blanket 6 feet above, a receptor for every salutation, folding like dampened paper, years of forgetfulness, fathoms of poetic decay. No miracles, I plan to stay where I am, a Lazarus for the 21st century, until one day someone buries this poem in the ground, and like a nymph of the groundwater, I pull it to life underneath. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Duclos, and I'm here with my dear friend, Spring Hurlbut. We're both in Montreal this evening, and we're so happy to join all of you for the beautiful vernissage of this show. Spring has traveled from Toronto today after a 6-hour drive and is here with all of us. And we'd love to engage with all of you by answering and asking questions tonight. So I have one question for Spring that I've always wanted to ask her. And that is, the works in this show are of your father, James, and of your mother, Eleanor. And your father, James, was one of the first works in the Ashes series.
That's true.
And almost 10 years later, then there's a work that has both your mother and your father together
Yes.
in one circle.
Indeed, yes.
What was that almost decade-like long process for you to first have James, your father, and his ashes shown on scales with a ruler, and then your mother, Eleanor, some years later when she died, with these beautiful ashes almost exploding into this gorgeous celestial circle. And then just recently, both of your parents come together in a single dyadic circle. What was that journey like over those 10 years to bring your parents' ashes together?
Well, I can only start at the beginning. When my father died, I was present with him when he died. And my mother came to visit me, and she gave me a quarter of his ashes. I hadn't asked for them. I was very bemused by this, and I shelved the ashes in my studio on a shelf and thought nothing more about it until 2005. And I thought that I would like to visit my father, and I poured his ashes on a tray, and I had these conversations with him. And it was very interesting. And then my mother came back to visit, and I said to my mother, may I use father's ashes for a work of art that I would like to make? And my mother is an incredibly conservative woman, and I was quite decided that she might have trouble with this request. So I asked her, and the first thing that came out of her mouth was, he would have loved that. So I felt very blessed that I could go ahead with my project with the permission of my mother. And so I laid all the ashes out. I was in a kind of commune with my father. We were together, and I had him selfishly all to myself. And I eventually found a way to present him, which was, I had been working on a lot of projects in museums, and the way they handle specimens is they document them very clinically. They put rulers into, so scale, they weigh the object and so on. And I thought, well, that'll give me a way in. But then it just sort of reached another level where, as I was working, I was able to have more interaction with my father's last vestiges, and I was able to create a kind of monster-like face, which surprised me. And it's not controllable.
And the same with your mom when you spread her ashes out. What happened to her ashes?
She literally was in a circular orb, and I had an exchange with my mother, but it sort of fractured. The globe fractured, and a lot of the particles floated down. But it's not a precise science. It's a kind of engagement that I felt I needed to have to retain their memory. And then eventually the last piece that I did with my mother and my father was a dyadic circle, which is a circle split in two. And one side was a light ash of my mother, and one was a darker one of my father. But what was so interesting, even though they were divided, there was a kind of holistic thing where they were joined in an orb together, and it was very serene and peaceful, which really surprised me. It really surprised me terrifically, and I didn't really. I was very blessed because the serenity of it was very different from maybe their actual lives, but it was it's a wonderful memory point.
Thank you so much, Spring.
Thank you, Rebecca, for these questions. They're wonderful.
We hope you can all see both James and Eleanor, and then James and Eleanor together.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Can you unmute?
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for this invitation, and I'm very, very honored to be part of this exhibition. And thank you especially to Timothy Long for this wonderful, brave and sensitive curatorial work. I thank everybody present here, especially those who are quite afar and with me. Thank you. I will be presenting some detailed image of the work on the skin of my father in this exhibition, while I read to you an introduction and extracts of a text that I wrote in the process of making this work. This was a period before and after of the passing of my father. I will be speaking in English and in Spanish. For those who don't speak one of the languages, I hope you can hear in my voice what you need to hear. We can move to the first image, please. I wrote this text and I photographed the skin of my father about a year and a half after he was diagnosed with a disease that affected the production of red blood cells. No signs of the disease were visible, only clinical studies. But suddenly a multiple of tiny red dots appeared all over his body. That was the systematic rupture of his blood vessels. What came to my mind when I first saw it was the night sky, but in red. I asked my dad if I could photograph his skin, and he said no. After several visits from the city I lived to the city of San Luis Potosí, where he lived, one afternoon he said, "Do you want to photograph my skin? Let's do it now." So that is how the journey of this work and what came with this work started. Volví al lugar donde vive mi padre, poco después de saber que había desarrollado púrpura, un padecimiento no doloroso, pero que indicaba un estado de alarma al ser la primera manifestación clara de la enfermedad que los médicos llamaban terminal. Me recibió en su recámara, me dijo ecuánime que estaba bien. Y en su característico hablar de médico, me comenzó a explicar acerca de su enfermedad mientras se arremangaba la camisa y el pantalón de la pijama, dejándome ver su piel. Al descubrir una y otra parte de su cuerpo, me indicaba dónde se concentraban los puntos rojos que produce la enfermedad. Los pequeños puntos rojos parecían tan solo de esos inofensivos lunares que tiene la gente mayor, de no ser que había tantos y eran tan rojos que en algunas zonas parecía que el color de su piel fuera ese intenso rojo púrpura y no el blanco, tan blanco que aún se veía en otras partes. Era increíble cómo la infinidad de diminutos vasos sanguíneos de pronto se manifestaban. Con todo detalle vi su cuerpo, notoriamente más delgado, su piel suavemente arrugada, sus puntos rojos, y vi a mi padre con tanta ternura y cercanía, mostrándome su enfermedad de una manera antes desconocida para mí. El color rojo púrpura dibujó sobre su piel en mi memoria una marca imborrable, a partir de la cual el tiempo que integraba nuestras vidas fue distinto. Antes, nuestro tiempo era uno, pero a partir de entonces y hasta ahora, el suyo se ve acortado por la sola noción de las circunstancias, mientras el mío, el de la sensación, parece eterno. Simultáneamente, el tiempo, mi tiempo, también se reveló a sí mismo como la posibilidad de una revisión transformadora en el curso de las cosas existentes y persistentes en la memoria por venir. This work is a necessary revision of my connection with my father as a person, as a presence, and as a archetypical image, and as part of me and my reality as I know it until today. It has been a journey of multiple reflections and considerations about life itself, about our time and space shared with others, about the intimate effect of others in us, about the deep love that makes us gravitate close together, make us sick together, get well intimately together, as members of a constellation, moving in common directions while each one of us fulfills their own apparently individual journey. Mientras me voy quedando con el tiempo de la sensación inexplicable, voy construyendo en él otra posibilidad, una nueva realidad que ilumine el aún de su presencia y su ausencia por venir. Gracias, papá. Thank you, everyone.
The song The Tree You Left Behind by Atahualpa Yupanqui speaks of the impossibility of being elsewhere, because your existence will always remain that of an uprooted tree. I have been an immigrant. Here I present myself as the darker child of the family, inheriting my father's features through the skin. While in Canada, this, my darker skin, draw me closer to Indigenous people in Manitoba, who often mistook me as one of them. This video is to the memory of my father, who passed away June 30th, 2021, due to complications from COVID-19. His memory is ever present in this legacy.
El árbol que tú olvidaste siempre se acuerda de ti y le pregunta a la noche si serás o no feliz. El arroyo me ha contado que el árbol suele decir: quien se aleja junta quejas en vez de quedarse aquí. Quien se aleja junta quejas en vez de quedarse aquí. Al que se va por el mundo suele sucederle así, que el corazón va con uno y uno tiene que sufrir. Y el árbol que tú olvidaste siempre se acuerda de ti. Arbolito de mi tierra, yo te quisiera decir que lo que a muchos les pasa también me ha pasado a mí. No quiero que me lo digan, pero lo tengo que oír. Quien se aleja junta quejas en vez de quedarse aquí. Quien se aleja junta quejas en vez de quedarse aquí. Al que se va por el mundo suele sucederle así, que el corazón va con uno y uno tiene que sufrir. Y el árbol que tú olvidaste siempre se acuerda de ti.
Hello, everyone. I'm just want to say I'm very happy to have the opportunity to share with you, since we cannot be at the space tonight. I'm going to read a short piece I wrote for the work I'm presenting in the show. So here it is. This is a fine cloud-like powder that leaves its pale traces on my fingers when I touch it. It has a predominantly dull gray color, but it also has some brighter, whiter tones and several large pieces that resemble little coral. It never occurred to me that ashes would have this texture. Never occurred to me that one day I'd be touching my father's remains. By the time my father passed, I had been living in Canada for 8 years. He died unexpectedly of a massive stroke in Veracruz, Mexico. I went to Veracruz for the funeral. When I returned to Toronto, everything seemed strange and everything seemed the same. Something had changed forever and it was invisible. My father never visited me in Toronto, so there were no traces of him in my house. I constructed the palimpsest landscapes as a way of navigating the process of mourning. I reconfigured an existing landscape with my father's ashes and, as a result, created something new, an alternate place where, as in memories and dreams, the past and present converge. Thank you.
Hi, Sherry. Can you unmute?
No, I'm not. Sorry. I thought I was. I muted and unmuted. Hi, it's an honor to be among you. My work is a blanket for my father, and it's a work that I did a number of years ago. The work is actually almost 30 years old. And even when I made it, my father had been gone for a few years. So it's called A Blanket for My Father, and it was made to be part of an exhibition that had the theme of return gifts. And so I wanted to reflect on, I suppose, my dad as a gift and how many things about myself I have from my, I look like my dad. I have the same temper and big laugh and a lot of other qualities. My dad was also an artist. So we had this, and still have, a collection of old photographs that we treasure. And we still had items of clothing that belonged to my dad. Most of the, the big things we had given away, but we kept ties and handkerchiefs and small items that had sentimental value. And so this is what I used to make this blanket. So I worked with my mom, I should say under my mom's supervision, because my mom is a very precise quilter and she would tell me to do something and I would say, oh, close enough. And she would say, there is no close enough in quilting. So we worked on it together. We actually couldn't have done it closer to his passing. We wouldn't have been able to do it. But the passage of time allowed us to work together, cutting up his ties and his handkerchiefs and sewing them into a log cabin design. And the log cabin was significant because my father was in the process of building a big log house for us all. And he passed away after a long and painful struggle with cancer before the house was finished. And we promised him that we would finish the house, and we did that. So this is a traditional log cabin design with a red square in the middle representing the home fire. We shared stories and laughed, but mostly my mom and I worked in silence. And as I went through selecting photographs, I found this one photo of my dad that I had never seen before. It was taken before I was born, and it shows this big guy in a leather jacket with a cigarette hanging out of the corner of his mouth, holding a puppy. And I thought, this explains so much about my life, particularly my taste in men, which definitely leans towards big, tough guys with soft spots, for puppies. So I sewed the text, a text with fabric and photos, and that became a blanket for my father. So I just like to read the text that I wrote that's on the blanket. My father was an artist, a designer, a carver, and a very reluctant electrician. He was one of those larger than life characters who saw the world as a gift to unwrap and every morning as full of anticipation as Christmas. He was a big man, 6'3", who could lift a car, literally, I saw him do it, and climb a hydro pole in 2 or 3 jumps. He could climb like a cat. I remember this one time when I was at the cabin with him and he was on the roof working and I had my nose in a book as usual. I could hear him laughing and finally I realized that he was calling my name, and I went outside and there he was hanging from the roof laughing. He grabbed for the roof after the stud that he was standing on broke, and as he fell he grabbed. So I went out, got the ladder, slapped it up, and down he came. I always thought he could do anything. So although the passage of time has gone on, I'm sure like many of you, he's with me every day. We don't ever get over these losses, but I think maybe over time we have the memories are a little bit more present than the rawness of grief. Thanks.
More safe for my father. Although I had been exploring the topic of how we are remembered and how we remember others for some time, My father's death provided impetus for me to engage with this topic on a far more personal level. Growing up, my family had a log house on a lake in the Laurentian Mountains, and it was that place that I most closely identified with my father. In 2002, my family sold the property. From that time until 2012, when my father died, I found it very difficult to look at photos or drawings of the lake. After my father died, I discovered that while I still find it very difficult to look at pictures of him, I can now look at the 30-odd years of material from the lake. For me, Rainbow Lake and my father are inexorably intertwined. These things that I have created are my more safes, keeping his spirit and memory safe. I miss him every day. What you can see now is the video score for the graphic score that I created for the canoe installation, Safe Passage. And I'm going to read the instructions for play with the biographical notes. The graphic score consists of an 8-foot-long, narrow sheet of paper made in the shape of Rainbow Creek from the inlet to the entrance of Upper Rainbow Lake in the Laurentian Mountains in Quebec. It is necessary to travel on this creek to get to the family cottage on the lake. This map is to be read from north to south, noting that the creek runs northeast to southwest. The northeasternmost point is the inlet, the southwesternmost the outlet into the lake. The score is divided into 4 movements: rocks, tamaracks, beavers, and water. The journey down the creek is marked by bubbles that rise to the surface as the canoe passes. These bubbles contain the air of my ancestors' whispered directions. It is important to note that each movement is profoundly influenced by the passing of the seasons, affecting the way one can travel upon the water. In summertime, the creek is languid, some might say lazy. At that time, rocks reveal themselves while concealing the greater part of what they are. It is important to note their territories. When fall arrives, the anticipation of winter leads to a quickening of the current. Rounding the curve of the creek, the tamaracks entice eyes upward, showing off their cadmium yellow fronds against the Payne's gray sky. Their needles help the creek with their secrets. Come winter, the creek is blanketed with snow over ice, reducing the clamor of the creek to a murmur. Save for its escape at the deliberate chaos of the beaver dam, where, despite the usual diligence of the caretakers and their efforts to contain it, the creek sneaks through the gaps and chinks, determinedly pushing through the frozen mud until it forgets itself and gurgles loudly in triumph, rousing its captors from their house. Until spring pours over the dam, hurrying the creek toward the lake. The arrowgrass slaps it as it rushes by, coerced by the wind, and the foolish young beavers are tricked into slapping their tails by the sound. And then the canoe arcs forward, slicing through water, and the waves themselves slap its side, as if to congratulate it on a job well done. The number of musicians traveling the creek at any one time may be variable. Solastalgia may be induced as the creek shifts its bed due to logging. The time to travel the creek is also mutable depending on the current and the ever-changing improvements to the beaver dam.
So I wanted to use this opportunity for a short reflection on the idea of kind of losing parents while you're parenting. And although I didn't lose anyone to COVID, I got thinking about the idea of grief and the range of losses that the word encompasses. And my journey towards my contribution to this exhibition began with the loss of both my parents quite together. And my daughter and I were the only two people to witness both deaths. My daughter was in her early teens, and so these losses coincided with the anticipation of my daughter's leaving home. So simultaneously, while I'm experiencing the grief of my parents, I was sort of anticipating empty nest grief. And I was thinking that both are really a shift in how you relate to the world. And maybe this is as good a definition of grief as any. So these losses, and you can bring up the images anytime. It was interesting how, despite losing my parents in my 50s, one of the first thoughts that came to mind was, does this now mean I'm an orphan? And am I still a daughter once they're dead? And, you know, am I still a parent once my child leaves home? So my work in this period was a way to consider some of these ideas. So my contribution is a 2-channel video installation. The large horizontal image is the hospital bed where my mother was dying. And then intermittently, a second projection overlays short, loud, bright cell phone videos that my daughter shot. A lot of these were shot out of a moving vehicle, many of them taken on to and from the hospital. And there you see the rear view mirror, which gave me the thought of the title. So the title is Are Closer Than. And if you recall, rear view mirrors always say objects in mirror are closer than they appear. And I thought that was such a lovely concept that it was relational. And it was the idea of kind of closeness. And I really felt that I could see my mother more closely in hindsight than I could when she was present. So, I mean, in the video, there's this contrast between the relative stillness of the pillow, which only has the rustling of a fan on the sheet, And then the frenetic motion and sound of my daughter's videos overlaid. And interestingly, when you overlay two projections, on the top image, darkness reveals while brightness conceals. So this was kind of a nice metaphor for the experience of loss and witness to loss. And I thought it was interesting that the frenetic speed of my daughter's imagery was all about motion and growth and everything. But then in the stillness of my mother's imagery of the hospital bed, she's actually the one going on the longer, bigger journey. So, you know, whether or not you've lost someone to COVID, I think this has been an interesting time for shifting how we relate to and within the broader world. And in that way, I see parallels to kind of things I learned about grief through my particular experience. Thank you.
Bev, can you unmute, please?
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here. I can't tell you what an honor it is. I'm here to tell you a story about how I made this work in 1981. First, you must know that I recently discovered that my mother was autistic. She was very fond of things and kept them all just so. She cried when one broke. And as she knew she was dying, she started to give away money, but not things. So I took photos of the storage boxes in the crawl space, and you can cue one of those, please, but not their contents. Then I sent each object within each box to their proper home. So the next image would be good. In the studio, then, I drew a photograph and then superimposed another photograph on top of that, and then altered the hybridized space. So what began as a self-protective strategy in art school 6 years before that turned out to be perfect for describing grief. Layers of ghost images created otherworldly images. Cue the first painting, please. Isn't it interesting how sadness distorts experience? It undermines initiative. It makes belief or hope totally irrelevant. It destroys meaningful perception. Sadness makes a person question everything they thought they knew. Sadness is also a body snatcher. For those 3 years of drawing 40 years ago, I was in a deep operatic labyrinth of black, unrelenting agony. Cue the second painting. But moving things to pack them up gave grief a purpose. It helped to use up free-floating panic. This was not the grief of love. For me, this was the grief of individuation. I kept this series of 19 drawings together for 35 years. They were exhibited all over the place before finding their proper home in Regina, where I got myself born, surrounded by nuns, so I could become the custodian of the memory of my mother's love of things. To end my story, I want to say that I have immeasurable gratitude to the Mackenzie for preserving that unique, intense moment in my studio. The last painting, please. 40 years later, this is where that work led. Thank you.
Good evening. My mom, Sita, and I are pleased to be joining you from Toronto. My sister, Leslie, and my brother-in-law, Michael, are joining from a separate location. I would like to sincerely thank Timothy Long for our vulnerable conversations and for the opportunity to be in such company of amazing, amazing artists. Since 2007, I have spent time thinking through concepts of loss, pre-mourning, and grieving in my practice. The work in this exhibition, The Impossible Speech Act, is one of the first lens-based works created where I reflect on my tendency to engage in pre-mourning the loss of my mom. French philosopher Jacques Derrida said that the impossible speech act is being able to say, I am dead, and in fact, be dead. When invited to participate in this event, I immediately thought that this would be a meaningful way for me to honor and remember my Uncle Mike. 6 months and 2 days ago, on April 26th, my family and members in our greater community said, see you later, to my mom's eldest brother. I would like to welcome my uncle's wife, my Auntie Shireen, his son Sean, and his granddaughter, who he adored so very much, Shamaya, who are joining us tonight from Florida. I'm speaking about my uncle tonight with hopes that in remembering him with intention, we are able to share space with him. Uncle Mike was fiercely passionate. He was loving. If you can imagine, for 42 years, he called my mom almost every single day. He was honest, and he was a man of great generosity. One of the many things he was generous with was his love of music. When we were little and we would visit him in New Jersey, while out driving, his stereo would be on full blast. He would pump his brakes to the beat, so the car would kind of move along to the music. And I'm pretty sure he just did this to make sure that my sister and I would be giggling. We would listen to everything and everyone, from the Drifters to Miles Davis, to every soca and calypso song imaginable. There isn't any one song that captures his essence, but my sister and I fondly remember listening to this particular one with him. The song we chose to play tonight is performed by Byron Lee and the Dragonaires and is called Wings of a Dove, a song we often asked him to play on repeat as we would sing along. The image that is displayed with the song is an image I took of the sun in the moments that my uncle was transitioning. When the song is finished, we will return to curator Timothy Long, and I want to thank you for joining us in this special moment.
Since I have no wings,
Thank you, Erika, for sending us off on such a joyous note. We started and ended with wings, and I think our stone angel has finally taken off. I want to thank each one of the artists for their presentation tonight. Well, I think it's brought out a few Kleenex boxes along the way. There's so much wisdom and so much beauty in what you've had to say and in the works that you've shared. And I really feel that this evening has brought us together with the kind of intimacy that's remarkable, despite being separated by miles and only joined by the camera that we have in front of us. I feel like we've been together, and that distance has collapsed. What a gift to have presence out of absence, to have memories that are more present than the rawness of grief, to have a darkness that reveals. Your words have just meant so much. So I want to thank each one of you. And I want to thank everybody who joined us tonight, and welcome you all to the exhibition, which will be on display at the Mackenzie until February 13th, as is the film program. Films are also available online. And we will be posting images from the exhibition along with artist bios on our Mackenzie Instagram account. So you can participate in the exhibition that way if you're not able to make it to Regina. I think that's it for tonight. I see all the artists here together. It's just so amazing to see you all together. I mean, this is a joy that's been a long time coming. This journey, and I really felt like it's been a journey that we've shared. And so, thank you all, and thank you all for joining us tonight and sharing these reflections in the midst of our grief and mourning. Thank you.